Hi, this is Joe Avati and welcome to Church Street Studios, my Sydney studio, where I record my podcast, A Serious Chat with a Comedian. Well, my guest today is probably one of the most foremost internationally renowned pop painters, pop artist. Paints for people like Leonardo DiCaprio and is exhibited all over the world. Let's go and meet him, Mr. Johnny Romeo. Johnny Romeo, thank you for joining me today on a serious chat with a comedian. That's what it's called, but it's lighthearted, mate. Now, GQ Australia described your work as, I'm going to quote this, part punk, part pop. So tell us how you describe yourself and what you do and how do you define your work?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for inviting me on this this podcast. It's hard because see, I'm a pop painter,
Right.
and it's hard to explain to people because I'm just not a generic pop painter. So I'm actually a culture jammer. Now, what that means is that I jam your memories in my work, and then I kind of jam some really contemporary social issues as well. So, take, for instance, things that you've grown up with, people have grown up with. Let's say Batman, right?
Yep.
I'll take Batman, and that initially kind of gets you in because I'm actually sort of painting imagery that you recognize.
Yep.
But then you've got text in my work as well, and stuff that's been crossed out.
Right.
And there's stuff that is subtext, so it's subverted meaning in the work, and that usually is a heavy-duty kind of contemporary, relevant topic of today.
Right.
And that's what culture jamming is all about. And so it's just not pop. I mean, a lot of the imagery is contemporary iconography, and it's mashed up with things to create a new story. Yeah. Best way of explaining, Joe, I'd say like I'm a sort of postmodern 21st century visual DJ. So I take an image, I resample it, and I send it out.
Yeah. Okay. That's what you do. So I always like to start there. Then let's go back.
Yeah.
Okay. You and I have known each other forever.
Forever.
Okay. We I always like to call you, when you say, oh, someone's my cousin. He's my cousin, but he's not really my cousin. But
that's
right. That's the way we.
I've always had an issue with that. Like, you're a cousin's cousin.
Yeah.
But we were like cousins, right?
Yeah. And so I remember you, always being, you were very confident, you were out there. Tell us about, looking back now and with what you do, what was it about you then that, you can see and you can understand why you're here today?
Yeah, I mean...
Were you into art back? You were into art.
I was in the music, into art, I was acting, I was doing everything. And like you, we were restless, mate. Yeah. Like we were young. Yeah. And we were migrant kids, but there was something about us, that we were creative, and we had this creative bent that we wanted to succeed at all costs, and it didn't matter what it was or how we did it. We just wanted to rise up,
Yeah.
And I remember that as a kid. I remember you had the same thing as well. We were just restless and energetic and vibrant, and we had direction and we had purpose. And for me, it was, like I was doing whatever it took. I was singing, I was in a band,
I played in your band.
Yeah,
I think,
you did.
You used to write songs too. Johnny was a superhero. Was that a song?
No, that's not me, man.
Oh, isn't it?
That's someone else, Joe. Yeah.
Oh, right. But am I right? Do you know what I'm talking about?
100%. Yeah.
Right.
So I was at art school, right?
Yeah.
So I was at art school, and then at art school, I had a pretty distinctive look. I was wearing a leather jacket, and
well, you used to look like George Michael.
I had a bit of a George Michael kind of look
but people used to mistake you for George Michael. You had that great, mate. It was
the beard and the fake earring, that I put on, and when I in my car, so my parents wouldn't know. So I had this interesting look, and but I was arty, and I remember at the time I really wanted to be a rock star, and I was hell bent on doing that. And I remember there was an ad on the university notice board for auditions for, like one of those boy bands where they pick people and put them together and create a boy band.
Yeah.
And I remember having, written some songs, and we got them cut, at a studio with a mate of mine who was a producer. And anyway, I applied and I sent him a photograph and I sent my tape off and I got a call back. And I remember going in to meet the guy and, I was blown away. I walked in and it was in East Sydney and it was Michael Browning, the manager of Noiseworks and In Excess and AC/DC and he kind of listened to my tape and he said to me, look, it's very pop, but he said, you've got a great look, He goes, if you can rough this up a little bit, he said, we may have something. So that's when I kind of thought, okay, well, now I've got it. This is my path. I'm going to become a rock star, And I remember trying to find a guitarist, and I got a band together, and we recorded stuff, and interesting times. And I was doing whatever it took, I was, and we signed the record deal. And then it kind of imploded, they wanted to sign me and the guitarist, but didn't want the band, and I had to then sort of put band members together. And I think, like I said, you came in and played for me for a while, and I was acting at the time, doing gigs, as an actor, trying to get some extra work, and Heartbreak High had just broken, and Alex Dimitriadis was the look, and every WOG kid in Sydney had a go, and so I was getting castings for this and that, and in the end, I was doing whatever it took, and then, obviously my art took off, and I thought,
so tell us about where'd you go from there? So we finished art school, what path led you to where you are today? Because you are, we're going to talk about it. I mean, you're a very well celebrated artist around the world. I mean, some of your stuff sells for big money and to some big name people around the world. So let's get to that pathway. How did it happen?
like being from an ethnic family, the minute you say to your mum and dad, I want to be creative, you know, they look at you strangely thinking, okay, well, you're not going to make any money until you're dead, And I go, no, but like I can do this. And they're saying, well, okay, but we need a fallback plan. And my parents, And so the fallback plan was, what if I become a teacher?
Yeah.
If I become a teacher, that will be the launching pad to what I need to do. I had a clear vision. Yeah. I pacified them, and I had a direction. Yeah. And I became an art teacher.
Yeah.
And so I started working in a school teaching art, but still keeping my practice going. So I had everything. I had my band going. Yeah. I had I was writing as well. I had doing some film work, and I had my art. I had my studio in Burwood. So things were like I had everything kind of going on. And I was just waiting for something to take off.
Yeah.
And then it sort of took off. Like I had my art career, and I was doing at the time a bit of graffiti around around the inner west, and
what, on the train stations? Well, on the
train stations and the old subways, and you remember Burwood had a subway at the back.
Yeah,
that's
right. Yes,
And I started doing these stencils, and these stencils of Ned Kelly, and I remember stenciling all of Sydney, and I became kind of well known for that.
Right.
And people started taking an interest, and they didn't know who it was,
How old were you at the time?
I don't know, 20, 23, 24. And so, and then I remember walking into a gallery. It was an independent gallery at the time, and I said, do you show art? Like, and they said, yeah, we do, Yeah. And I said, look, I've gone to COFA. I went to the College of Fine Arts, New South Wales University, which is good pedigree in the art world, And so they said, okay, well, bring your work in. Let's have a look at your work. And I showed them stuff, and they were blown away. They said, oh my gosh, you've got to have a show. We'd love to do it. And that's what you refer to, Joe, as an artist-run initiative space where you pay to use the space, right? And we had a show. And for whatever reason, people caught on. Sydney Morning Herald caught on. They wrote a review, and there was a lot of interest in my work, and the place was pumping and packed out. And we sold out immediately. And
when you say we, is it someone else? Or
me in the gallery.
Right.
Okay, we sold out. When I speak when me in the gallery, we sold out.
Yeah.
I was an emerging artist, an independent artist, and ultimately the commercial galleries started taking notice, and I had a few other independent shows that were very successful, and then I had a pick of commercial galleries that sort of came in and said, look, we would like to represent you, and that will mean taking your career to the next level.
Right.
And obviously, a canvas that you were selling for, a meter by a meter, which was $300 back in those days, had to go up in price.
Yeah.
Because now the gallery had to take 40%. They had to pay their staff.
Yeah.
They had to keep the doors open, the lights on. They had to run a business. So it became a little bit more of a business-minded approach to art making. And then that was one of my first commercial galleries in Sydney, and then I went, Melbourne and Adelaide and Brisbane, and then I went to New Zealand, and then it sort of just took off from there,
But now, help me understand this, because this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you as well, which is to understand the art world. I mean, I love art, and I just buy what I see, what I like.
Yeah,
and if I like it,
that's fair enough.
Right,
yeah.
and but some people collect.
Correct.
Sometimes people might not necessarily like what they see, but they'll buy it because of who the artist is. So what happens there? How does that work in terms of? So you've put out this what do you call it? A series?
A body of work. Yeah.
A body of work. In the beginning. How long did it take? What happened then before you got to where you are now?
Okay.
What really launched you?
Okay. So what you've got to understand, I want you to imagine this, right? So working in a commercial gallery is where every artist wants to be.
Right.
And the reason why they want to be there is because commercial galleries have the collectors, they have the reputation, and it's an entry point into the art world.
Right.
It legitimizes your work globally once you're part of the commercial chain of galleries, right? Now, it's very difficult to get there. Back in the day, as an artist, you'd go around with a portfolio and knock on a door and show the commercial gallery your work, and they would say yes or no, and they only take, they got to take a chance on you, because they got to make money.
Yeah.
So if they can't see money in you, they won't take a chance, right? But that's where you want to be. That is the NBA of the art world, equivalent. Now, so you start your career off, and you're playing kind of local. And then you kind of get picked up and you might go to college. Yeah. And then you're hoping to hell as a college basketball player, you're going to be scouted for one of these major teams. Yeah. And then you kind of get scouted. Only 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 300, gets picked up. Then that opportunity is that you've got to then prove yourself in that stable, in that franchise, to be on the roster. And then you've got to make the team. Yeah. And then when you've got to make the team, you've got to be actually a player in that team. And that's how commercial galleries work. So as an artist, you kind of, you kind of work your career in order to be noticed, in order to be picked up by a commercial gallery. Once you get to a commercial gallery, it legitimizes your work. It actually authenticates it globally in the art world. And ultimately, collectors want that because they're saying, well, this person now is taken seriously as an artist because commercial galleries are now representing them. Yeah. Yeah. And that's it. That's the way it works.
And so how long did it take from when you started knocking on doors, when you started showing your work, to when you were a team player, when you're on the team?
It took a while, Joe. It took a while mainly because, I came up at a good time. I came up before social media had blown up. My kids these days and artists these days, it's oversaturated, Everyone's an artist. Everyone's selling online. Everyone's promoting themselves online. Everyone's a star. Yeah. And commercial galleries are no longer interested because it's an oversaturation. But I came up where I had to prove myself. Yeah. And I don't know, it would have taken 10 years on the best part of maybe 10 years to actually get my first commercial gallery, and you know, it was hard work.
Is that an average time? Is that quicker than normal? Is that
10 years from when I probably had started. I started when I was at university, so I was 18. I was doing sort of group shows. I was working as an independent artist. You know, every time I could find a space, I'd rent it. You know, I'd put on a show, nobody would come. I'd try to promote it. You know, I got cards made up. I'd distribute. I'd con people to actually put cards, you know, in shops to try to create the buzz. And eventually, you know, my time was right. You know, like it was 2000, I think, in early 2000s, and I had a bit of a history on the street. People knew my work, recognized my work, and the commercial gallery started actually jumping on board. Also, it was the time where a lot of graffiti artists were actually jumping into commercial galleries, and so it was just a perfect time for me. And then I had my first sort of commercial show in Sydney, and that was successful. And then I remember at the time, you know, I had my second gallery approach me and said, "Hey, we would like to represent your work." And you go, "Okay, no problem." And then, you know, you paint a body of work and you send it off to Melbourne, and you fly down for the opening, and you hope to hell to sell a couple of things just to keep the name ticking over and your career ticking over. To the point where I am now, where you know, I mean, you know, like people collect my work, and they there's a waiting list for it as well. So, and it's good.
Was there one particular event or one particular show or gallery or some, you know, that was a defining moment, and it just went bang, and then from there you've never looked back?
Well, there were two moments. There was a show that I did, I think it was in 2007 or 2005. It was in Newtown, and that was one where we had, for whatever reason, I just decided that, you know, I was going to really push that show. And I thought, you know, this is my chance right now. And I remember taking out an ad, and I remember getting flyers and distribution of flyers, and we got postcards, and, you know, I got friends, and I got anyone I could find to actually drop them off across Newtown, across Paddington, and, you know, Wallara. And, you know, there was a buzz for that opening night, and a few of the, you know, the magazine, Bragg magazine, and the, you know, the street magazines of the time ran stories, and the Telegraph Mirror ran a story. Sydney Morning Herald reviewed the show, and it was the pick of, you know, the emerging artists, and that kind of that show was packed out, and we sold the show. When I say we, the gallery and I had sold that show outright. So there was a bit of hype, and then I remember moving onto my next show, which was at a really ultra cool street gallery called China Heights. And anyone at the time started their career at China Heights, you know. And China Heights was, again, an independent gallery. And I put on a show there, and again, it was very well supported, and another commercial success. And then I had commercial galleries knocking on my door after that.
Now, you've explained the representation side of it, but there must be something about your work. Now, you described your work in the beginning of our chat here, right? Has it always been that theme? What was your early work like? We're going to put some pictures up here of your early work and what you do now. But there must be something about what you do, what you paint, you know, what you represent, the way you see things, the way you visualize things, and communicate it on the canvas.
Well, yeah.
Tell us about that.
So you're right. So, I mean, so again, starting out as a young boy, I was a bit of a graffiti artist, you know. I've got images in my head, images that incorporated, you know, visual and verbal words. And, you know, comics were a big influence, and cartoons were a major influence, and television was a huge influence in my work. And I'd combine both in a really raw kind of way. And, you know, I added a lot of color because Picasso was one of my heroes. So I'd add a lot of color into what I was doing. And it kind of fitted in to street art, but it was something kind of different in a way. It was pop, but it was also still really expressionistic and raw. And so, and that was it. I mean, my influences were a lot, you know, pop culture, the things that I watched growing up, the bands that I listened to, and the music I was into, and skateboarding, and I would incorporate all those elements into my work. Hence why, you know, GQ called it part punk, part pop, because it would be like this sort of, a collage approach where you would put an image and then put another image and text and cross things out, and it would be raw. It would be raw. Yeah. And that's the way it started. And, now that I've been working for such a long time and refining, I mean, my draftsmanship now is really good. It's strong. And so everything's tighter, you know.
Hope you're enjoying the podcast. We'll be right back straight after this ad break. Hi, this is Joe Avati, and I am very proud to say that I am now one of the brand ambassadors for Elite Supplements. One of the supplements I take every day is resveratrol, an anti-aging supplement. You know how they say that 1 glass a day of wine is good for you? It's because it's got resveratrol in it. But do you know how much wine you actually have to drink to get any benefit of it? 11 litres. Now, it doesn't take Einstein to figure out that if you're drinking 11 litres of wine a day, you ain't going to be around long enough to see any benefit. So make sure you get your supplements from Elite Supplements. Resveratrol worked for me. Look how young I look. And I'm 73. Hi everyone, I'd like to thank one of the sponsors of the podcast, St. Romeo, who provide great skincare products for men. I'm going to show you some of the products. St. Romeo Facial Cleanser, Rock and Roll Face Scrub. And if you had a rock and roll lifestyle, you're going to need a face scrub. This is their deep cleansing charcoal bar. How putting charcoal on your face cleans it, I have no idea, but it works. This is one of my favorites, the Cucumber Eye Gel. Must be for vegans. And they've got heaps of stuff for your hair too. Shampoos, styling creams, and Stronghold for your hair. Obviously, I don't need any of these. I'd like to thank St. Romeo for being one of the sponsors for the Joe Avati podcast. Do you actually so I've seen a lot of the work on Instagram.
Yeah.
Do you actually, so like you might have an image of Freddie Mercury or George Michael or I don't know, was it maybe Che Guevara? I'm
Whatever,
not sure. Yeah, right. Do you actually paint that? Is that a stencil? What is that? How does that work?
So if you look at some of the videos online, you can do Google searches. Yeah. I actually draw. So I actually draw it live. Yeah. So that was the whole business of kind of when I went to university. There was graffiti art is lowbrow and looked upon not as being institutional or commercial. Yeah. So at uni, I had to kind of leave painting on walls and tagging and doing all that kind of stuff. I had to start painting on canvases, and that kind of moved more into the fine art. And so I needed to actually find an equivalent of the spray can. I needed something that was quick, something that was fast, something that was fluid. And I remember paint doesn't do that for you because it's lumpy and it's slow and it takes time to apply. Yeah. So I remember looking at an oil stick, and an oil stick is compressed oil mixed together with bee wax, and it's pure color. Yeah. And you kind of take the skin off it with a cotton rag. You take the skin, and it's like a crayon, and you actually draw with it, and it flows, and it's beautiful and creamy, and it flows, and then you kind of mat it down with your brush. And that for me allowed me the fluidity as if I was working with a can. And where I made mistakes, I would just smudge and smudge colours in. And people thought, oh my God, that's so neo-expressionistic, you know? Yeah. But it was just me making mistakes and smudging, you know? Right.
Okay, so here's something that I really wanted to talk to you about now, because you sort of brought it up. So, firstly, can you draw, like if I said to you, there's a landscape or a tree, or someone's face, can you do that?
Yeah.
You can do that. Yeah. Okay, you're classically trained.
Classically trained, yeah.
But you have to be naturally gifted to be able to do that, right? As well. Yeah. You can learn techniques, but you have to be able to, Yeah. Yeah. So here's a couple of experiences I've had. Okay, and you explain to me this, because there's a lot of people listening who are going to be thinking the same thing. Okay. So first one, I went down to was it MoMA, I think, in Tasmania. Is it MoMA in Tasmania? Yep. Okay. The first time I ever saw something like this was the Guggenheim in Spain.
Yes.
Right. So I go in there, and okay. So to a lot of people, when they think art,
Yep.
okay, and I think a lot of people understand now that art takes different forms. Okay.
Yep.
A lot of people traditionally they think the old classic paintings of a portrait, a landscape, something that you see in religious sort of motifs and so on. I go to the Guggenheim, right, and there's this massive room.
The poo machine.
I don't know if it was the poo machine. I don't know what it was. It was like a fence. It was a massive room, and quarter of the way up, to the room was a fence.
Yeah.
A cannon, and it was just this black shit shot out of the cannon, and it landed on the other side of.
Yeah.
And they shot it, 60, 70 times, and it formed this pile of shit. What it looked like.
Yeah.
And people are like,
they love it.
Wow. The fuck is that about?
All right, let me explain.
Okay, so and then there's a couple. There's two more. Okay, let me get these out because I get excited about this. Another time, I went to MoMA. Okay, so a massive room again, and it looked like imagine someone got the top of a snooker table.
Yep.
Right. Without the pockets, it was just that felt. Right. It was about I don't know, 15, 20 centimeters high, but 20 meters long. 10 meters wide, and that's all it was, green felt. And all these people are looking and going, wow, I just couldn't understand it. This is the best one. No, there was two more. In France, in Paris, there's the Modern Museum, whatever. There's this massive painting on the wall, a massive frame on the wall, and all it was white. That's it. There was nothing on there, Johnny. White. And I read the little, whatever.
The didactics,
Yeah, okay. And it said, this is by one of the fathers of modern...
Yeah.
I go, but there's nothing there. I mean, I don't understand.
All right.
What is this? And who's the person that just does a squiggle, like one line, and the painting's worth 60 grand? I love art. I love collecting art. I appreciate it. What does this mean, John? Can you explain to me?
I'll explain. But I do want to start with a story, a quick one, before I explain.
Yeah.
So a mate of mine, he goes, let's go to the Museum of Modern Art down at along the rocks there. Yeah. He said, but before we go, he said, let's go for a walk along the markets here. Yeah. And he bought one of those chains, like a... the beaded chains, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, he bought it and he's put it on.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, it was super tight on him, Big Croatian lad, and he's going like this and he's going, this is going to choke me. But I go, no, wear it. It looks good, man. It looks really good. We get into the museum. We walked upstairs and we walked into a room, and all of a sudden he's doing this and it's popped.
Right.
And all these beads have gone across the room.
Yeah.
And he's on the floor now because he's embarrassed. He's picking them up.
Yeah.
And people are walking in going, oh my God, what a performance. They're milling around him, looking at him, going, what a performance, right? Now, they are conceptually connecting to what he's doing. Now, when we make an artwork is not only about sort of the technical accomplishment of the painter. Are you a good drawer? Are you a good painter? There's also part of it where it has to have conceptual strength. What is the artwork trying to tell us that is beyond what we see? That's a clever way to actually explain it.
Right.
Now, almost a bit like Mozart, right? Mozart writes his music. But where does the music lie? In the guy that performs it, or is it in the writing? So where's the artwork? Is it the guy that performs Mozart's music that has been written by him? Or is it in the writing? And it's a bit of both, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way artworks are. The artworks are usually, there's a technical accomplishment in what they're doing, but there's also a conceptual strength. You're looking at, like your works that you were talking about, they're very conceptual. So they're modern art pieces, postmodern, sort of really conceptual, heavy on the concept. Yeah.
But how can I look at a massive frame that has just got white? Now this was 4 or 5 meters long, maybe 2-3 meters high. It was just white. Well, where I might as well look at a blank wall.
No, I know, but
or a squiggle. But my son can do that with his crayon. But why? Well, why am I paying a fortune for this person's squiggle?
But the artist's intention was possibly to actually create that emotion in you. He wanted you to be blank. He wanted you to be in a reflective state. He or she wanted you to be pensive and thinking about, why is this so? You get it? Ultimate, beautiful peace of mind, you know?
Yeah.
So
interesting.
It is interesting. There was a black one as well of those paintings, right? And again, another mate of mine was totally confused. Yeah. And he asked one of the guards that was standing by, guarding the painting, he said, hey, bro, what's all this about? And he said, the best way to explain it to you, he said, if all the masterpieces were all burnt into ash and the artist took those ashes and actually smeared it across the canvas, it'd be black like that. Yeah. And he said, this is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
So, mate, it's the way you angle it, the way you position it, the way you frame it that makes it art, you know?
Are you probably Australia's most popular or celebrated pop artist?
Leading pop artist,
Yeah.
Because I do it not only across Australia, I do it across the world. So, I mean, my shows are, you know, a bit like yourself. My shows go to cities all over the places and museums all over the place.
Yeah.
And you know, I get the luxury of traveling and meeting new people and meeting new collectors and you know, doing great things. Yeah.
Can you tell us about some of the? I mean, some big names have bought your art and also commissioned you to paint for them.
Yeah, I've had a lot of I've done a lot of interesting work with people. I've collaborated with some big brands. I collaborated with Blink 182. I painted their angry bunny when they came to Australia. When they go to different countries all over the world, they asked the leading artists of that country to actually paint it. And then there's a scavenger hunt that was on Triple M. I was in LA. I was tweeting where it was, and people were racing around trying to find it to win backstage passes to hang out with Blink 182. I've done stuff with Audi. I've done, you know, collaborations where I painted a car. I've done, just recently, I've got beer that I do in America. Yeah. I've done with 0 Day, who's got a Johnny Romeo beer range out. In terms of commissions, you know, I've done major commissions for a lot of Hollywood sort of actors and politicians. So I've done stuff for people like, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio. I've done stuff for people like Jensen Ackles from Supernatural, Lou Grozza Jr.
Where does your art bought the most, would you say?
It's all over the place, mate.
And you live between Sydney and
Los Angeles.
Yeah. Why Los Angeles? Is there a reason?
I like America, and I like I do a lot of work in America, particularly on the East Coast, Philadelphia and New York, and I show in I do a lot of, you know, I like New Orleans. I show there. I show in San Fran, in LA. I show all over, but like LA is the closest to Australia. So if I've got to get away, it's the quickest exit point, you know. You know, and America is a funny place. It's a fantastic inspiration, fantastic, like, you know, life, living and lifestyle and opportunities, and a bit like Australia, beautiful people and great artistic opportunities. But, you know, I would never live there. So, you know, I often come back. Yeah. But depending on where my shows are is where I base myself. You know, if I'm doing something in America, then it's easier to base myself in America. If I'm doing something in Europe, it's easier to base myself in America. If I'm doing something in Australia, it's easier to base myself here. Yeah.
Yeah. What sort of galleries, you know, with your particular work, what's the mecca of galleries to be in, you know, or, you know, I don't, you know, make us understand, you know, with your work, because I'm sure that, you know, if someone's painting something more sort of classical, you know, there's certain galleries which would, you know, stock that kind of work.
Correct, yeah. Well, but galleries have an aesthetic, so, you know, it's hard to explain their aesthetic because no artist can, and a lot of artists are trying to work it out because they want to be represented by these galleries. But a gallery director and, you know, gallery staff have got a particular aesthetic, and, you know, whether it's pop and whether it looks at, see, my work is neo-expressionist pop, and I'm kind of leading that charge globally. There's a genre in pop art. Jeff Koons is neo-pop. So he's different to what I am. Then you've got lowbrow surrealist pop, which is totally different. That's the juxtaposed magazine kind of pop artist, right? So there are different genres. And so different galleries go, well, no, we don't like, you know, lowbrow surrealist pop. We kind of want, you know, neo-expressionist pop. And we also like color. And we also like sort of color, geometric color. Right. And so they look for artists that actually fall into that category. Whereas some galleries will go, oh, we like more retro 60s pop or whatever it is. And we kind of represent those artists. So different galleries have different aesthetics with, you know, different artists, you know. No gallery would ever carry purely just a pop artist and pop artists. They will blend, they will mix it up, because if you fail selling pop art, then your business is closed. So it's best to kind of sort of operate in the idea that pop art is about color, and so color becomes your focus, and color, geometry, and artists that are working on conceptual contemporary themes. And so galleries will then look for artists that do that.
And so, I mean, can we call him the godfather of this kind of thing? Was that Andy Warhol? Is that when it all sort of started? Explain to us how, and what do you think of him? And well, you know, tell us what he did for your genre of art.
Well, I mean, pop art started in England, and but it really was Andy Warhol that that kind of took on the lead from that in America, and he started basically painting everyday objects. Everyday objects growing up, you know. You know, not dissimilar. We're not that dissimilar, Joe, in the sense that, I mean, you know, your stories are about your life growing up. What you observe and, you know, what you were surrounded by. Andy Warhol did the same thing. So he kind of took the banal, everyday objects that surrounded his life, and he made artworks out of them. And they were objects that came from the supermarket, you know, the Campbell soup cans that he remembers in his cupboard, you know, and it was Brillo boxes. It was, you know, soap and you know, soap products. And those then were shown, and they were very controversial when they were first seen. But it actually started a completely new movement that people got really excited about. It was everyday art for everyday people. And people got into it because they could understand it. See, pop art is potentially the easiest of arts to kind of enter into, because there's not conceptual like you were saying before. It's the easy dance to enter. It's easy for viewers to kind of associate and understand. And that's why I guess it took off. And that's why I'm guessing pop art is so popular in today's world, because it's something that everybody is surrounded with, you know, like, you know, your kid, you know, like he's covered in art, you know, from his pajamas to his walls, to his slippers, and to his, you know, beanie, everything is art based. And that's exciting, mate. That's an exciting time, because that is pop art. And it's our pop culture as well.
As an artist, is there, like, you know, you how often do you change your series? You know, like right now, what do you call this series now?
This is Landed. So the current show that I'm just showing, the show's called Landed. My next show opens in Melbourne in March, and that show is a totally different show. So different.
So when you say a totally different show, let's try and understand this here. So, you know, you've got, is it like a theme? Is that how you describe it?
Well, I have a way of working. And I put out a body of work which is 12, 13, 14 paintings. A bit like a band records a record. You go away, you record your record, you go into the studio, you release your album. That album solidifies 12 months of work or 2 years of work. Then once that's out and viewed or collected or bought or listened to, The artist then goes back into the studio and produces another body of work, another album.
Yeah.
In my case, I'll go back into the studio once this show closes, and I'll go, okay, well, that was successful. We've sold all the paintings. Everything's sold. And I'll start again. I'll start building a new series, which I've already started. I'm working on a new body of work at this moment that will be shown in Perth in September.
All right. But do people expect to see the same kind of a vibe, a style? Like, you know, if I do a show and I do a tour and I come and do another show, because this is kind of what's happening for me at the moment. Obviously, I was known for being, you know, talking about being Italian. Then I started to become a little bit more, you know, not just for the Italians, it's for the greater ethnic community. And now I'm discussing things that has got nothing to do with that. And so some people come and, they want to hear me talking about being ethnic and growing up the son of Italian parents. But I'm doing a lot of things that's got nothing to do with that, right?
Yeah.
It's my style that they come and see, yes, but the content is different. So how does that, you know, relate to yours? And the other thing I wanted to know is, can you, like, are you in danger of putting out too many Johnny Romeo paintings of the same series that, everyone's got it? You know,
No. Okay. Yeah. So the thing is, I get this question all the time. I do a lot of work in schools and universities, and I do artist residencies all across the world, you know, at universities and colleges and schools. And kids always ask me the same thing. Hey, would you ever change your style? And I say to the kids, when you go to Woolies or go to Coles and you go and buy a can of Coke, what do you expect? And they go, Coke. I go, but if you didn't get Coke, would you be happy? And they'd say, no, I'd be angry because I want to buy Coke. I said, exactly. That's the way I am. Why would I go and change what I do, what I'm doing? Of course, there's going to be stylistic changes in what I'm doing. You know, I'm going to conceptually kind of change an approach. There might be imagery change. The stories that I'm telling obviously will change in the work. The references that I'm making will change. However, they won't deviate too far away from what I'm doing. When I first started, Joe, I think I spoke earlier about the looseness in my work. It was loose. And it
what
was
do you mean
really,
by that?
Well, it was loose. It was really raw. It was semi-figurative almost. It was drawn and you could see it, but it was very, very loose.
Right.
And as you become better and as you work harder in the studio and you're painting continuously, your imagery tightens up. Yet you become stronger at drawing and it changes. And people see that it changes. And if you look at, there's a lot of books out on my work where they look at work that I did in 2007 and compare it to the work I'm doing in 2022. There's a vast difference in the way I'm working. Stylistically changes. And it will keep changing. You know, potentially I would love to be able to go back and really do, you know, become really loose again. And that's, you know, Picasso did that and Matisse did that. And a lot of the artists then kind of at the end of their careers become looser again. They don't kind of paint for shows. They paint for themselves. And they kind of almost revert back to their start again.
Is that allowed?
That's the dream.
But is that allowed because, you know, you've made money and you've made enough money that you're comfortable, you don't have to worry about producing the kind of stuff that, you know.
Correct.
You know.
So in my world, you're kind of a little bit governed by commercial galleries, you know. I keep on, you know, using other sort of examples like a band, right? The band walks into the studio and the record company expects the band to record an album which is very similar to the last three.
Yeah.
But if it's different, the record company goes, what are you doing? Like, we're not going to be able to sell this, you know? And to a certain degree, a commercial artist like myself can push the envelope, but you're always kind of working with what you're doing and trying to evolve slightly, if that makes any sense, you know? I wouldn't take a chance in some of the major galleries with changing completely.
But wouldn't they already know what you're going to give them?
No, they would never know because every show's different. Everything I paint is always different. This current show that I've painted for Sydney, Landed, is about transformation. The whole show is about how do I transform myself How do I redirect my energies to live to my full potential? How do I rediscover myself? And that's what the show's about. So every painting in that body of work sort of looks at the hero's journey. The hero's journey, the Joseph Campbell kind of book, where the hero has a dilemma and goes out to fight this dilemma, wins and is victorious and comes back and actually is transformed. And that's what this show's about. So every single piece in that work is about transformation. It's about, a new you or new me or new person.
Yeah.
My next show will be totally different. My next show will be conceptually about something totally different. References will be different. Imagery will be different. And the way I culture jam will be different.
Right.
Because I'm juxtaposing imagery, bringing imagery together, changing the flavor and the look, You'll never get one image which is purely one image. You'll always get it juxtaposed and mashed up with something else. And then you've got the words that actually direct the meaning of that particular work. Yeah.
So, like, for example, there's the Australian artist Bromley. Okay.
Yeah, David.
So how much of it is, like, if I see it on the wall, right?
And you recognise it, Bromley.
I recognise it. I can recognise it. It's got that colour. It's got the girl with the tit hanging out. That's his... What is that? That's his style.
Well, that's his approach. It's his style. His practice,
Yeah, right. So...
But it's not the only thing he does. He does other things as well.
Right. So, but when I go into someone's house or if I go into a gallery, I don't need to be able to read who the artist is. I should be able to look at it and go, that's a Johnny Romeo, right?
That's fantastic.
Right. And is that what your aim is?
Well, that's what it's all about, yeah.
For the commercial gallery? I mean, do you do other things? Do you ever like, so I'm going to do something, I'm going to paint faces with colour, when it can be completely different and see how that goes?
Yeah, but I could never, and I've thought about this, but I could never do it at a major gallery. So what I do with things like that, I always curate shows around the world. So I'll curate a show, let's say in Philadelphia, and I'll invite, 20 artists, friends of mine from around the world, and I'll say, let's do an abstract show. So secretly, we're all producing 4 paintings for this group show that I'm going to curate, open, press release, discussing what this is all about. So I will experiment over there. And then if it takes off, then it will be fine. I can then introduce it into my practice, maybe at one of my shows, But you can't take a chance, Joe. Yeah. You wouldn't take a chance,
What about, because the art world is a very interesting... Well, the world itself, the people who buy art, and there's some big money exchanged for artists, for certain works. I mean, some of your works sell for 25,000 plus, right? Yeah,
more.
Yeah, right. And what astounds me sometimes is the amount of money that people pay for, like, for example, a Banksy. And a couple of years ago, where they sold a Banksy, and then when the hammer hit, bang, it fell down into a shredder.
Yeah.
Well, what's that about? And how much money was paid for that? Millions.
Well, Banksy was taking the piss out of the art world, And
do you know him? Have you?
Yeah. I've shown with him, so my work's been included in major shows.
Have you met him?
I've met.
Because no one knows what he looks like.
No, but I kind of do. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, I kind of do. So I think I know who he is, but he would never come out openly and say, "Hey, I'm Banksy."
How does that happen, though? I mean, at some point, he would have to be an emerging artist. Imagine someone says, "Oh, look, I'm wearing a mask. Here's my stuff. I'm not coming."
Well, the graffiti world started with this whole idea of anonymity.
Sorry, is he a pop artist? What's he?
Well, yeah, he's a culture jammer, but he's a street artist, right? So he's more a street artist. Anonymity was a big thing, right? So he'd be graffitiing and he didn't want to be known. And as soon as his work became very popular and people started noticing, it actually entered the sort of pop culture sort of world, and people actually wanted to collect it because it was so interesting. And then he kind of went into the commercial market. He dipped his foot into the commercial market, but he did it on his terms. He didn't do it via galleries. He did it on his terms. He was big enough and he was well followed enough and he was, saturated enough that he could run his own show. A bit like Damien Hirst,
Right.
I was in New York when he had his residency. It was 2014. I was having a show, actually, at the time in New York. And he was having a residency in New York. And everybody was talking about Banksy. Banksy's in town. Banksy's in town. But he would never come out and say he was in town. You would walk, you would drive down, wherever, and you'd see a Banksy piece that was put up overnight, But he would not do it. He would have a team of artists that actually did his work.
Yeah.
So he's got a factory of artists that actually produce the Banksy brand.
But surely someone's when he was starting out, someone's had a selfie with him. Someone's taken a picture. How could that not leak? How could we not know what this guy looks like?
Well, we kind of do, but he hasn't ever publicly come out and actually said, "Hey, I'm Banksy." I think I know who he is. I've shown with him, so I'm pretty convinced I know the dude.
Yeah.
However, I would never walk up and go, "Hey, bro, I'm Johnny, you're Banksy, how you going?" I just, you just take it for what it is, But what was interesting, so he does a residency in New York, and he does these stencils, simple black stencils on white canvases, right? Little canvases. And somebody's selling them in Brooklyn on the side of the street. He's selling, he's got a vendor, he's got all these, and some guys walk past and has bought 12 of them, right? $60 each.
Yeah.
Banksy takes out an announcement in the the paper the next day saying that was me and they were my works. And automatically those works went from $60 to $30,000 each one. Now, my agent at the time had picked me up in New York and we were driving to Pennsylvania, and he was one that had bought 6 of them, right? So when he heard the news that morning, mate, he's on the phone cutting deals, trying to move them to, Russia and move them to, buyers in Italy and, trying to get them through, whilst it's hot. Very, very interesting. So Banksy kind of took the piss. He's sort of saying, hey, I'm playing with you. I'm toying with you. The market says this, but I'm going to play with the market. See, when you buy a Johnny Romeo work, the value is solid right around the world. It's like a currency.
Yeah, that's what fascinates me. And then explain that a little
bit. It's a currency
more.
Because I spoke to you about commercial galleries. So once you're in that commercial sort of playing field, it's recognized around the world. So your money value, your work value is like real estate. It holds value and it goes up every year. So every year it goes up in value and the scarcity goes up. And there's a market value that you can buy a work from me in Australia and it's worth the same money in America, worth the same money in Italy, worth the same money in Europe. And it's just a market value because of the commercial gallery, authenticity, authenticness of it all, They authenticated it all,
Yeah. How do you, okay, so, there you are, you're painting something. It's your time, okay? It could take, how long does it normally take you to paint?
80 hours.
80 hours.
It's about 8 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah. That's worth something, okay? That's at distributor price. That's worth something at a certain price. You could be doing it for a hobby.
You could be,
right? So what you've done for a hobby, you there you are. You spent 80 hours
working away.
You've done that. That's cost you your time.
Yeah.
And the cost of the canvas, the cost of the paint, whatever. That might be worth nothing. Right? For you, there's a certain value of it, 25,000.
Yeah.
And it goes because,
well, I don't value it, the market value.
Yeah. How does Johnny's painting, how does a Johnny Romeo now that I might buy for 25 grand, what happens or what could happen that it's going to be worth 250,000 in 7 years' time or next month or in 15 years' time? What determines that?
Well, the galleries determine it. So the galleries determine, hey, we want you to paint less, but we're going to increase your prices. And you kind of go, all right, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And so,
but that's based on what? But isn't that based
Well,
on
it's
people
ba-
coming, enough people coming
Well,
in going,
it's
have you
based
got a
on-
Johnny Romeo? I want a Johnny Romeo.
well, it's based on demand, but it's also based on success. It's based on history. It's based on, hang on, this guy, every time he paints something, like nothing is available. And so it's scarce. There's no available pieces on the market. And so they're kind of going, well, yeah, I mean, it has to go up because of the popularity, because of sellout shows, because of the demand. And that's the way it works. Like, for instance, at the moment, there are, I've had to retire a couple of sizes. I don't paint a meter by a meter. So,
why is that? Explain that. What's wrong with a meter by a meter?
Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a meter by a meter, but a meter by a meter would be a entry point collector. And it would be an entry point gallerist that would be interested in taking those works on, right? So for instance,
an entry point gallerist in terms of they can only sell paintings that, or works that are an entry level affordability. Like,
correct.
I can only spend $2,000, $4,000. And we're not talking about the 700,000 for 50, 60. What's that price point entry level?
So for instance, my gallery in New Orleans, right? When they approached me, I'd never shown in New Orleans, ever. And when I said that I'm going to do a show, they said, would you do a show? I said, of course I would do a show. But I didn't want to take a chance by painting a meter 50, a meter 20. I thought, hang on, by me painting these works and then spending 3 months and then shipping them down there, potentially not being able to move them is not conducive to good business, and it's not going to be very good for my career. So I gave them a meter by a meter. So we painted a meter by a meter, a show that was a meter by a meter. And the gallery sold them and did very well. So they have now moved up to the next level, if that makes any sense, And the entry point is, I think it's $6,500 US for a meter by a meter, And so that for that gallery is a good market entry point because they had never sold a Johnny Romeo before. So for them, that's a good place to enter. What I've found is that some of my collectors in New Orleans have jumped on my shows in Sydney and my shows in Australia and are paying bigger amounts of money, larger amounts of money for bigger works because of the Australian dollar. Right. The Australian dollar's bottomed out a little bit. So they're going, okay, well, $12,500, $12,000, it's going to cost me $8,000, US, I want that work, and they ship it over. They buy it and ship it over. So, so I don't do a meter by a meter unless I feel that the gallery can't, it's just a first time gallery that we're first working together, or they haven't potentially built a market for me in that city. I don't take chances, Normally I paint a meter 20 by a meter 20, but I'm at that point now where, in my current show in Sydney, a meter 20, there's only one work left at that size, So a meter 50 by a meter 50 is people like that size, and it's a really good size. The 2 meter by 2 meter, so we're talking for big foyers and big homes, right? There are none on the market. So basically, the gallery can dictate whatever price they want because there are none available. I can't even buy one. See, when I started painting 2 by 2, my agent said to me, hang on to these because these are going to be worth $50,000, $60,000, Johnny, and you're going to want it in retirement down the track. And, being me, well, I paid another one, don't worry about it, And I got rid of them. They all went. They all got sold, and there's none on the market. So now I'm painting 2 by 2 for my next show, which happens in September in Perth. When I say next show, my next big show.
So it's the next year. It's different. It's going to look
different,
to
completely
what we're
different.
seeing now. Which we're going to show. So it's going to be different. I've got a few more questions before we wrap it up.
But does that explain it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But I'm going to put this to you because the art world for most people is a world that's unattainable. Not unattainable. Sometimes people think, you really got to know what you're buying.
No, you don't.
You got to have a lot of money, all that kind of stuff. It just seems like a lane that only certain people travel down. Okay, the regular person doesn't kind of travel down this lane where they're spending all this kind of money on artworks, or nor do they have the space. I was very lucky in the house that I built in Melbourne that I had big walls.
Yep.
So I got massive sort of paintings or pieces. Let's call them pieces.
Yeah.
That I could display.
Yeah.
And
you would have bought some of those from emerging artists.
Absolutely.
And they're
I really
ones
liked
that,
yeah.
and they're ones that you kind of liked.
They're just what I had this eye for it. I know I have eye for it because I'd scour Paris. I'd go through all the art galleries in Paris, and I would just look around, and then I'd go to the person. I go, wow, how much is that one? And they go, well, sir, you got a good eye. You picked the most expensive one. And I would do that through all the galleries that I would go.
No, they saw you coming, bro.
No,
they saw Wolf of Wall Street, Boiler Room Tactics.
No. I go, it just so happened that, I would always, my eye would gravitate to the best, the most expensive, art. So I used that as a guide. I went, you know what, I don't necessarily go, I've got to have this or I've got to have that. It's what I like.
Yeah. And,
right?
if you did a bit of research on those artists and you kind of researched who they were and where they're showing, you'd be shocked to see of the progress that some of those artists have made. And the work that you purchased would be worth potentially double, maybe 3 times, had those artists kicked on with their career.
Yeah.
You had gone into the market to actually buy a work that would decorate your home that you were happy with.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, you may have unearthed a gem.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Okay. All right. So before I get to a couple other questions before we sort of wrap it up.
But can I just jump in, Joe?
Yeah,
because you're not going to believe this, mate. But one of the most inspirational pieces that I remembered as a kid growing up, and I'm talking as a little kid growing up, we grew up in Italian families, and no one had painting, or we all had paintings, but, they were normally paintings of, Calabria or paintings of, Rome or
the Last Supper.
The Last Supper.
Yeah.
But I remember coming into your house as a kid. You know where I'm going with this, right?
I don't know.
No, you will. Know. So I walked in as a kid, and if you remember, there was a painting of you and your brother as kids.
Yeah, we've got that. We've still got that.
Oh, my God. That's so vivid in my head.
Really?
And it was one of the pivotal kind of paintings that really motivated me as a young boy. You were wearing the overalls.
Yes.
The little.
Do you remember it? Wow.
I see the reds. I can remember the big smile. Your big smile. Beautiful.
Well, we're gonna. I've got that. My parents have still got that. Right. And we'll splice that in here.
You
so
should.
People know what
because
we're talking about.
I remember walking into your house, and as you walked in, where the staircase was, it was just there, leading to the staircase. It was. It was front of center as you walked in. And as a kid, I remember walking up and just looking at it and just going, oh my God, that's a painting about a subject matter that I know. You know what I mean? And it was a really vivid moment in my life. Yeah.
If I remember correctly, the artist was a guy called Aquino, something like that. And my dad reckoned, you know what it takes. This guy's a big star now. Could be.
He probably is, mate.
He might be, he might not.
Yeah.
So before I get to this next couple of questions, is there, because I know my knowledge of art is limited. Is there something else that we should know, as the listeners, the viewers watching here, that we need to know about the art world that you think is fascinating?
No, look, I think art's exciting. I think people approach it with a lot of reservation and hesitation as well, thinking that I'm not going to get it. It's something not for me, but it is actually for you. Like, you can enter any gallery and actually appreciate what you appreciate. And that's good enough. That's really good enough. You could take it a little bit further by actually having a view and having an opinion. And then you might want to talk to your wife or to, your husband about what you believe the work is trying to tell you. And that takes it to the next level. That opens up dialogue. Good art creates dialogue. Yeah. And that's what I believe everyone should be doing when looking at art. They should be talking, discussing. And that's what you want. Yeah. You want dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. My home in Melbourne, the one we sold now, it was a art museum, sort of, house museum sort of thing. It had this massive long wall, very high. You know, the art was displayed all the way along the wall as
Beautiful.
people walked in. You know, and it was like an art gallery.
And people loved it.
People loved it. People sat there, they'd go and they'd tell you, you know.
I once painted for a collector, Joe, and I don't know why this guy wanted, a New Zealand collector. He wanted me to paint Donald Trump.
Right.
And I've done it. And you see it on my Instagram. It's live, me working on it. And he also, he wanted me to paint, a year later, Hillary Clinton as well.
Right.
And I painted Hillary and Donald for this collector. And I said to the agent, my New Zealand guy, I said, what's the go? Like, I mean, I've done politicians before. I've painted Australian politicians for themselves or for their collections. But why would this guy? He goes, mate, Johnny, he just wants to polarize people. He wants people to walk into his house and actually talk about the work.
Right.
And I went, it's beautiful. And that's what sometimes art is all about, you know?
Yeah.
It's just about conversation.
Yeah. Who hangs in your house? Who, you know, who are your favourite artists?
Now, I'm very picky. I tend to not hang any of my own work.
Yeah.
Because I don't want my own stuff.
What do you mean? When people come to my house, I'm playing my albums and my DVDs on the TV.
Yeah, yeah. So I once met a Hollywood actor. He was a fairly well-known actor in the 90s, right? And he invited me back to his house, and he said, "Oh, I'll just put my show reel in while I'll just go make some drinks, you know." And I swear to you, I sat there watching his show reel for about half an hour, and then he came back perfectly when the show reel finished. Right, Definitely don't have any of my paintings on the wall. I'm a really interesting collector, Joe. Like, there was an artist by the name of William Strutt. William Strutt was the first academically trained Australian artist to ever come to Australia. He trained in England. He was a pre-Raphaelite painter, trained in England, and then he also went to France, and he also studied at the French Academy. And he was a social realist painter. And then he migrated to Australia, and he was the first academic to ever arrive in this country. And then he went to the Ballarat goldfields, and he drew what he saw, the people panning and the gold rush and all that. And he also painted the Black Saturday fires that ripped through Melbourne. Yeah. If you go to the gallery in Melbourne, the Victorian Gallery, there's a big painting of the Black Saturday that he had painted. And it's got all the animals, and it's got fire, and it looks like a scene, like a biblical scene, the Holocaust, you know, like the end of the world, Holocaust. The end of the world, you know. Well, I was able to purchase some of those sketches that he had done for that painting. I can't afford the painting, obviously, right? Yeah. But I've got some of the sketches of the animals that he had done that belonged to that work. So it gives it provenance, you know. It actually comes from somewhere, and it's part of a collection, and it's part of a series, and people can look at it, and I can go, well, that animal there, I've got the sketch for, you know. Right. And and that's interesting. Yeah, I'm a very picky collector. Right. I like to find quirky things in what I buy that I know have value to me. I'm not really worried about the value on the market, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm the same, you know. Yeah. And so who are some of the emerging artists that you like, you know, that around the world that you think, you know, oh, we should have a look at?
Yeah, there's a couple of good guys.
Apart from yourself, of course.
Yeah. No. There's a couple of good emerging artists that I like. You know, a lot of them I've included in shows that I do. Right. One of my best mates is a guy called Kurt Herman, and he's a fabulous artist that I've introduced his work in Australia, and that has gone very, very well. He's an American, Pennsylvanian-based artist. He lives in the Appalachian Mountains, and his work's interesting. He's an emerging-ish kind. He's a bit beyond emerging, but he's interesting. There's another artist on the Gold Coast, Japanese-Australian artist, guy by the name of Go Sugar. Cool name, right? Yeah. And his work is really good as well, and one that I kind of like. But there's a lot of work that I like, and usually what I do is I not collect them, but I curate them. Yeah. So if I do if a gallery approaches me and says, "Hey, would you curate a show?" I would bring 20 of my all-time favorite artists together for a show. And I've done that many times around the world, yeah.
And who was your favorite from the old school? You know, who did you Who
Picasso,
really,
mate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember seeing Picasso for the very first time in the art class. I saw a book.
Yeah.
And I was blown away, completely mesmerized.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of thinking to myself, I could leave the book here or I could pinch it, take it home. And I remember taking it home, and I drew from it every single day. And eventually I said to the teacher when I had finished school, I said, oh, look, remember that art book? I just want to let you know that I borrowed it, You can have it back, but and she goes, I knew it. So yeah. Picasso was a game changer. In terms
for
everybody, for modern art.
Yeah.
For modern art. I mean, ahead of his time in so many different ways, like constantly, you speak about reinventing himself through different periods and, working with the same motif and trying to create something new. And the guy was just this, I don't know, this animal that just worked and worked and worked and worked. I mean, I someone told me the other day that he would paint like up to 16 paintings a day could do,
Yeah, right.
The guy was a workaholic until he's died, Yeah.
And a womanizer.
Yeah, I don't know. Kids all over the place.
I've read the book. Yeah.
Kids all over the place,
Interesting
wives
guy.
all over the place. Yeah.
Interesting guy.
But yeah, so Picasso was, for me, a game changer. Yeah.
Johnny, my last question to you is, what do you do to, every day you're at the height of creativity, with what you do. What keeps you motivated? How do you keep yourself motivated, interested, and how do you keep your creative juices flowing?
Yeah, I get excited by creative people like yourself, Joe. For me, hanging around creative people, shooting the breeze like we are now, talking about our approaches and the way we do things, for me is exciting. I like to read where I can. I read widely to sort of, to keep that excitement going. I don't rest too much. I'm a workaholic, and I only sleep 4 hours a night. And so I'm constantly on the go. But, I dream of kind of the possibilities moving forward where I can do different things with my work, and try to reinvent myself in the way I'm working, but in a new way. Almost like a John Lennon Lost Weekend,
Right.
I'd like to lose myself
Yeah.
in order to kind of, sort of rediscover myself in my creative art, But in saying that, it's hard because, I've got a lot of pressures from galleries that, before I'm kind of painting, they're selling,
Yeah.
And even before I paint it, they sell it. So for me, it's...
But how do they... But what are people buying if it hasn't been made yet? Can you let me understand that?
Either commissioning or they're buying. Like I've got people that are on a waiting list to see what I'm painting for my next show. So when I post things on Instagram, right, and I start drawing, and you see a work in progress, 9 times out of 10, those pieces are sold.
Yeah.
In the sense that a collector will jump on board and go, I want that.
Right.
Even before it's finished, I want that.
Right.
And that's a good place to be,
Yeah.
But, to a certain degree, you're under pressure because you need to actually fulfill that demand. And you don't want to kind of stray too far away from it because you want to be successful, But deep down the track, you also want to do something more. A bit like what you were saying, introduce, a new routine into what you're doing, But you don't want to kind of jeopardize your career or offend anyone that's come to see the way you work, you know. Fine line. And hopefully I'm going to get there.
Great. Johnny, thank you very much.
What a pleasure.
Great insight into what you do, into you, and to your work. Beautiful.
It's awesome. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.